Chapter 2 Mr. and Mrs. Juicy O. One night my father came home from the office all excited. He told us Mr. and Mrs. Yarby were coming to New York. He's the president of the Juicy O Company. He lives in Chicago. I wondered if he'd bring my father another crate of Juicy O. If he did, I'd probably be drinking it for the rest of my life. Just thinking about it was enough to make my stomach hurt. My father said he'd invited Mr. and Mrs. Yarby to stay with us. My mother wanted to know why they couldn't stay at a hotel like most people who come to New York. My father said they could, but he didn't want them to. He thought they'd be more comfortable staying with us. My mother said that was about the silliest thing she'd ever heard. But she fixed up Fudge's bedroom for our guests. She put fancy sheets and a brand new blanket on the hide-a-bed. That's a sofa that turns up into a bed at night. It's in Fudge's room because that used to be our den. Before he was born, we used to watch TV in there, and lots of times Grandma slept over on the hide-a-bed. Now we watch TV in the living room, and Grandma doesn't sleep over very often. My mother moved Fudge's crib into my room. He's going to get a regular bed when he's 3. My mother says there's a lot of reasons I don't like to sleep in the same room as Fudge. I found out that 2 months ago when my bedroom was being painted. I had to sleep in Fudge's room for 3 nights because the paint smell made me cough. For one thing, he talks in his sleep, and if a person didn't know better, a person could get scared. Another thing is that slurping noise he makes. It's true, I like to hear it when I'm awake, but when I'm trying to fall asleep, I like things very quiet. When I complained about having to sleep with Fudge, my mother said, "It's just for 2 nights, Peter." "I'll sleep in the living room," I suggested, "on the sofa, or even a chair." "No," my mother said, "you will sleep in your bedroom in your own bed." There's no point in arguing. Mum wasn't going to change her mind. She spent the day in the kitchen. She really cooked up a storm. She used so many pots and pans, Fudge didn't have any to bang together. And that's one of his favorite pastime, banging pots and pans together. A person can get an awful headache listening to that racket. Right after lunch, my mother opened up the dinner table. We don't have a separate dining room. When we have company for dinner, we eat at one end of the living room. When Mum finished setting the table, she put a silver bowl filled with flowers right in the middle. I said, "Hey, Mum, looks like you're expecting the president or something." "Very funny, Peter," my mother answered. Sometimes my mother laughs like crazy at my jokes, other times she pretends not to get them, and then there are times when I know she gets them, but she doesn't seem to like them. This was one of those times, so I decided no more jokes until after dinner. I went to Jimmy Fargo's for the afternoon. I came home at 4 o'clock and I found my mother standing over the dinner table mumbling. Fudge was on the floor playing with my father's socks. I'm not sure why he likes socks so much, but if you give him a few pairs, he'll play quietly for an hour. I said, "Hi, Mum, I'm home." "I'm missing 2 flowers," my mother said. I don't know how she noticed that 2 flowers were missing from the silver bowl because there were at least a dozen of them left. But sure enough, when I checked, I saw 2 stems with nothing on them. "Don't look at me, Mum," I said. "What would I do with 2 measly flowers?" So we both looked at Fudge. "Did you take Mommy's pretty flowers?" my mother asked him. "No take," Fudge said. He was chewing on something. "What's in your mouth?" my mother asked. Fudge didn't answer. "Show, Mummy." "No show," Fudge said. "Oh, yes," and my mother picked him up and forced his mouth open. She fished out a rose petal. "What did you do with Mummy's flowers?" She raised her voice. She was getting really upset. Fudge laughed. "Tell Mummy." "Yum," Fudge said. "Yummy, yummy, yummy." "Oh, no," my mother cried, rushing to the telephone. She called Dr. Cone. She told him that Fudge ate 2 flowers. Dr. Cone must have asked what kind, because my mother said, "Roses, I think, but I can't be sure. One might have been a daisy." There was a long pause while my mother listened to whatever Dr. Cone had to say. Then Mum said, "Thank you, Dr. Cone." She hung up. "No more flowers," she told Fudge. "You understand?" "No more," Fudge repeated. "No more. No more, no more. My mother gave him a spoonful of peppermint-flavoured medicine, the kind I take when I have stomach pains, and then she carried Fudge off to have his bath. Leave it to my brother to eat flowers. I wondered how they tasted. Maybe they're delicious, and I don't know because I've never tasted one, I thought. I decided to find out. I picked off one petal from a pink rose, put it in my mouth, and tried to chew it. But I couldn't do it. It tasted awful. I spat it out into the rubbish bin. Well, at least I knew I wasn't missing anything great. Fudge ate his supper in the kitchen before our company arrived. While he was eating, I heard my mother remind him, "Fudge is going to be a good boy tonight. Very good for Daddy's friends." "Good," Fudge said. "Good boy." "That's right," my mother told him. I changed and scrubbed up while Fudge finished his supper. I was going to eat with the company. Being 9 has its advantages.